Thank you, Melissa. It's nice to start on an embarrassing note like that. But there were many more embarrassing things Melissa could have said. She was I'm happy that you left some of those items out that I gave you to say. You could have talked about. It's a pleasure to be here, and indeed, Indiana is such a beautiful state. It's a beautiful time of year to be here, too. And indeed, I did my senior honors thesis at Dayton State Hospital. I had a game called Monopoly, where I had people who we were hoping to get out of the hospital from their chronically ill, mentally ill state. And they played a game in which they went around the board collecting time, spending time at various locations. Some they could spend it either to try to get out of the hospital by picking the right activities, or to stay in longer, choosing the activities that get them in trouble. So we had a good time with that, but it's nice to be back in the spirit of developing means by which people can have a better life, and certainly to pick populations in need is of interest to us, our group. Resilience is sort of a main theme of a lot of my work, certainly over the last 12 years, or 15 years even. And social intelligence is the new arm of that work. It's informed by resilient work. The social intelligence aspect comes from actually I've studied social relations a lot throughout my life, but in particular coming to the conclusion that that resilience is social after all. And I have a chapter I just wrote on that, and be happy to share it with you if you send me an email so you can get my rendering of that. So let's see. So how do I advance? Do I use the clicker? Yes? Oh, okay. Without the light. Ah, okay.
Speak a little louder for the people in the back of the room.
I'm sorry?
Speak a little louder for the people in the back of the room.
They've asked me to speak a little louder. I want to make sure I repeat everything that's said as well. So I'll try to speak a little louder. Can you hear me well now? Is that better? All right. So to map out what I'm going to be saying today, I'm going to start with a description of some of the findings from a study of resilience we've done on midlife, funded by the National Institutes on Aging. That study informed us about the critical nature of social relations in physical and mental health of people at midlife. Then I'm going to talk about two interventions that we've worked on. Both are online or could be online interventions, and with a modicum success for each of those interventions. I was not satisfied with the results of those interventions, though they had great promise, and my colleagues may still think they do, but I myself thought it's time to move on, and that's why I'm going to talk about a social intelligence intervention that we're building. And particularly valuable, perhaps, and relevant to the topics today, the idea is a social intelligence applied to people as they age, perhaps interrupting some of the poor trajectories in the lives of people middle life, to interrupt the possibility or the increased inevitability of health downturns, reducing that for those at risk. But also we're thinking of social intelligence applied to training of caregivers, professional caregivers, in particular in life care facilities. And you'll notice I have a colon to my talk here, which doesn't show up now. I have to go, can this go back? Yeah, which is humanization of social relations. So that's really what the social intelligence program is about. And with caregivers in life care facilities, it's about reacquainting with them and giving them a greater sense of how to humanize their relations, both with each other as staff, but also in their staff-resident relationships. All right, so that's the overview. Now, resilience itself comes in many forms, and the processes that underlie resilience, you may come to mind several aspects. One way that people think about how to be resilient is to be meditative, to go on hikes, like this woman on the top of one of our favorite hills in Arizona, in Phoenix. Now here's another one. We published this handbook called Unlocking Resilience as a manifestation of the vitality of strengthening musculature. Okay, that's true. Our definition of resilience overall, in terms of outcomes, has three parts. Being able to recover quickly. You could think about this recovery psychologically or physiologically. Sustainability, which is you don't shut down, you keep going, so it's not interrupting goal progress, as in Karen's talk today. And then growth, or learning from experience. Successful adapting to change, to stressful events, but change is not done in isolation. It's not a lonesome task, but a social one. There's usually social ingredients to everyone's fulfillment of a goal. Social relations are involved in every time a person says that we're able to overcome a difficult time. Now, the media and the events that discuss the greater capacity of individuals to be resilient almost inevitably focuses on the qualities of the person. So I'd like to change that somewhat today to give you attention to the qualities of the social relations that befit us, that allow people to be resilient, and then to say to themselves, look what I've accomplished. The truth of the matter is, if they attribute it carefully, they'll see that other people are fundamental to that progress that they've made to make their lives, to be able to recover, sustain activity, and to grow and learn from life challenges. Here's a favorite paper of mine, and probably of some of you as well, certainly those of you in academic life who've studied the relationships between, well, here, social relations and mortality. This was a meta-analysis of 148 longitudinal studies on aging, over 308,000 participants, followed an average of 7.5 years, the average age of 64, and then followed after that. 50% increase in likelihood of survival when recontacted if they had strong social relationships. So social relationships are good for mental health for sure. They're also good for physical health in many ways, and the avenues by which those effects play is important to study. And of course, longevity is associated with strong social bonds. Okay. I wonder what that red line means on the top of mine. Well, nevertheless, you don't see it, so that's good. So, resilience at midlife is a community study that we've done here in Arizona, studying 800 people across 40 neighborhoods in metropolitan Phoenix. We picked 40 census tracts that were representative of 10 neighborhood types and selected 20 people, men and women, for each of those 40 to get 800 people. It's a 5-year study funded by the National Institute on Aging. And we're interested in studying those forces, both good and bad, within the person and their social worlds, to distinguish those who successfully adapt to adversity and those who don't. Here's a picture of Maricopa County. And I live, well, I guess there's another pointer here. I live downtown somewhere. We use self-report questionnaires about neighborhood social connections, child attachment and trauma, and personality. We did telephone interviews in which we got narrations of the people telling us about their most stressful time in their lives. They answered questions about their health and their state of mind. For a quarter of the sample, randomly selected, they received micro-longitudinal assessments, as well as home visits. Well, we did laboratory stressors on those same people that were 1/4 of the sample, with physiological and psychological responses to stresses, as well as home visits on the entire population, blood work, blood pressure, genetic analyses of profiles of these people in terms of and also BMIs and other body mass index, and other indicators of the allostatic load, or the relative physiological and psychological condition. Now, I'm going to focus on a couple of stressors today, but we did a large panel of assessment of both major life stresses in the past year, traumatic events throughout their lives, and some ratings of chronic stress, but including reaching into their retrospective accounts of childhood stress, childhood trauma, particularly through abusive relationships in the home. Now, how do we know if someone is doing well? These are the kinds of outcomes we picked. We had measures of psychological well-being, psychological distress, and physical functioning, functional health. This is a rendering of the confirmatory factor analysis that was done to distribute these scores, well-being, positive affect vitality, measuring psychological well-being, anxiety, depression, negative affect versus distress, and social and physical and emotional role functioning, pain functioning, or physical functioning. I'm going to talk about some of these measures as we go on through the study. Okay, one of the things I just did before coming here, because I want to make sure you get a sense of what some of the findings are. This study is just unwrapping. We finished data collection just recently, so now we don't have all the answers to the questions you might want to ask about what we have in the data set. But I wanted to give you some rendering. So this is a simple multiple regression analysis looking at key factors on poor physical functioning. And that's the physical functioning measure you just saw in the previous slide. These are some of the variables that show up and are continue to stay in the equation as we enter more variables in. Childhood adversity, in particular, emotional abuse, okay, in childhood. Sexual abuse and physical abuse are also in the equation here, but emotional abuse is one that occurs much more frequently in the sample, and also so about 20 to 25% of the sample reported some emotional abuse in childhood. And it was correlated with poor physical functioning. Life history of traumas, another that stayed in. These are mostly traumatic events of a social nature, okay? Financial downturns has surprisingly stayed in as a powerful indicator of physical functioning, and not just physical functioning. As it turned out, we conducted this survey right during and after the recession, 2007, 2008. It was on people's minds. It was had a powerful effect on the lives of these people. And you might think it affected the people with the lowest incomes, and we had a wide range of incomes on our sample because of how we selected our sample. But it affected mostly those of middle and upper middle incomes. I think they perhaps had the most to lose in the financial downturns. Negative family ties, also strong predictor of poor physical functioning. Now, when you graph this, is another confirmatory factor analysis. You look at variables like emotional well-being, distress, and physical functioning, those three factors I mentioned earlier. The negative family ties affects all three. Positive family ties plays a role in regulating the degree of negative family ties, okay? And together relate to these physical functioning. You could say, but now I want to talk more in micro about the financial events briefly, okay? Because we often neglect to think about whether these economic events play a role in the lives of people, and if they do, how they do, okay? So this gives you an idea of the frequency of the reports, of the occurrence of certain major financial events taken from the Perry Life Event Schedule on the lives of our 800 residents. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention earlier, but maybe it was on the slide, the range of ages of the midlife years, from 40 to 65. Relatively equal numbers of men and women in the sample. Okay. So as you can see, a major worsening of financial condition is the most frequently reported. People could report more than one of these events in a single interview, though. Pressure to pay bills by stores, creditors, or bill collectors, inability to pay for medication, medical necessities, falling behind payment and rent and mortgage. A lot of mortgage, people back in their mortgages. I know that's happened in Indiana, but in Arizona it happened in spades. 1 out of 10 people behind in their mortgages, and people going bankrupt because giving up their homes because of this. And our population, our sample, was among these people. Major financial events are correlated with psychological distress, emotional well-being, and physical functioning, all negatively and powerfully associated in this confirmatory factor analysis. Now, how do we know, well, how is it that these financial events have their effects? Okay. So one way to look at that is through these micro-longitudinal. So we looked into the daily diaries of people. We had financial events as one of the sets of everyday stressors that they could report. And people with more major financial calamities over the past year in their daily diaries reported many more financial stressors. So the question is, what is the path of distress for people with financial troubles? I'm going to get to that path in a minute. I want to mention one other important difference. There's another thing that those of you know, some of you know my work on affective complexity, is there's a fourth thing that happened to these people when we looked into their diaries of the relative change in the nature of their emotional experiences. That generally speaking, reports of positive and negative emotional experiences, positive and negative affects, they're not independent, but they're relatively different or significantly. So you can get, a person can be high on, they can have positive emotions, but they also can have some negative emotion too, or they can have none of either, okay? The important thing to know is that we're complex human beings emotionally. We have lots of states of feeling, sometimes depressed, sometimes tired and weary, sometimes delighted and excited, and sometimes we have all of those feelings. Well, the thing is, the affective complexity of our lives is one measure of psychological health, okay? The relative independence of positive and negative affective states. What we found is those people with strong financial burdens, okay, many major financial burdens in the past year, the size of their affective structure shrink. That's how we'd say it. There's a lot of ways of saying it, but anyway, the relative balance of affect was different, certainly more negative affects, fewer positive affects, but also when they had more negative affect, they also had less positive emotional experiences. There's a stronger inverse relationship between those two. So that's a fourth category of outcome that I added here. It's true for those with many financial stresses. Okay. Now, but digging into the diary data, what we found was interesting was that, and these are some of the everyday events, expense, overdrawn account, ran out of money, gambled it away, creditors calling. Where did this, how did this affect their well-being? Well, we found that the primary source of the difficulty that mediated, that played a role in how the person then became unhappy with their everyday lives, was through social relations, okay? That is, an increased negative social interactions with family and spouse and with friends. Actually, not with friends, but with spouse and family in particular played a role in reducing the positive emotional states and increasing the negative affective states of these people. You could chart it like this. Negative financial events lead to negative interpersonal events, lead to more reports of interpersonal stress, and then to more negative affect, one after the other. So even with financial events which are not interpersonal or social, still it's a social problem, you see. It happens in the interior of the everyday lives of the families of people undergoing financial crises. I have that income variable in there too, just to remind myself to tell you that it's not a straightforward relationship. And again, it was not the poorest, although they struggled, and not the wealthiest, but it was those with incomes between $60,000 and $120,000 a year who were most affected. They reported the most disturbance in negative interpersonal relations as a consequence of the daily financial events that they had. Now, we also, in our interviews, daily interviews, we asked people to report on positive social experiences, okay? And although financial difficulties increased discord, they did not reduce positive social experiences, and in some cases increased it. And those with more positive social experience were less affected by that discord. So if you graphed it, sort of, it would look like this, where positive interpersonal events increased positive emotion, which then played a role. I'll have these arrows intersecting, you see. And that in the language of statistics means that these moderate or influence the relationships. So that means negative interpersonal events have increased interpersonal stress, but if the person has many positive affects, they have, if that is co-occurring at the same time as those negative interpersonal events, that relationship is weaker. And same with interpersonal stress and negative affect. That relationship is weaker for those who are able to garner positive emotion. You know, when you think about it, you know, Karen just talked about extroversion a little bit, and that's one personality source of people higher in positive emotion. But extroversion involves a strong social component, okay? And in some of my past work, I'm pretty interested in positive emotion, and people in positive psychology very much interested in the role of positive emotion in affecting, changing, accenting, increasing the capacity of people to be adaptive, right? That's vitality, energy, strengthening, okay? But when you ask yourself this question, which I've been asking myself lately, where do positive emotions come from? They are primarily sourced in social relationships, you know? Our most positive affects come from the comfort, care, or the excitement in our relationships with others. So that's why I'm focused on social relations, okay? Now, here I have a graph of some practical uses, and I'm going to focus on the, well, social intelligence training. But there are other, of course, ways in which we can develop the means by which to help older adults in their everyday lives, including social cohesion, community gardening, just as one example, building neighborhoods with closer social ties, and that would help that. E-health with depression and chronic pain. I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit. Elder youth mentoring, I'm not going to talk about that, like in programs like Experience Corps, where we can get people who are older to play the roles that they're really potentially valuable in, and that is showing, displaying, using the wisdom that they've gained in their ages to inform and help younger people. We did this one intervention called the Baby Boomer Depression Automated Phone Interview Intervention. We had 3 conditions: mastery, control, mindfulness, and acceptance, and the health tips, which is like a public health intervention. We did this by telephone with our colleagues from University of Connecticut, automated telephone service. Course of treatment, 27 days, 21 daily diaries. We had 2 prior to treatment, and then we charted them in diaries. Now look, over time, we clustered the days into 11 different clusters here. Health tips is HT, MC, I think it was mastery and control, and MA is mindfulness and acceptance, okay? And what you see is a downward pull of depressive symptoms. We selected them to be depressed. No surprising, actually, that they then got better all by themselves to some extent. Now, there was some evidence that, well, there's no difference, really. There's some evidence, well, statistically significant, yes, both the control, mastery and control, and the mindfulness reduced depression more than the health tips did. If you look at the end of the graph there, at times 10 and 11. Positive affect across days. Okay, here, people getting these telephone calls from mindfulness and acceptance, and to a lesser extent, the mastery and control did better than those who just got health tips. And physical health, physical health reported over time across the diaries. Indeed, the mindfulness accepted, they looked like they were doing stunningly well. Okay, one problem here. Our findings, our improvement in these conditions did not last, okay? In other words, we didn't report this exactly in our findings in the published paper, which you can read, and I think it's in your documents here. But the truth of the matter is, They lasted only as long as the intervention did, and then a couple days longer. That was it. That's not good enough, you know. It's just not good enough. Well, I thought I got rid of this one. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can't read that. You probably can't read that in the back, can you? All right, you don't need to really. If you want to, though, you can ask me and I can send you the detail. This just gave all the sessions. There were 12 sessions. In this other condition this other program, we treated people with fibromyalgia pain. We had 29 people in the mindfulness condition and 40 people in the health tips. Same health tips as the other one. But this is about the same mindfulness condition, but it had a better focus on chronic pain and how you could help yourself, and which included 12 online sessions. Okay. And across days, indeed, the health tips, well, they didn't do so well on pain coping efficacy than the mindfulness condition. And on positive affect, the health tips, well, they actually started getting worse, okay, over time, that dropped. But the mindfulness condition, they seem to be getting better, all right? That's a sustainability of positive emotion across time. Enjoyment of family relations, you see this increase over time in mindfulness and self-acceptance intervention compared to health tips. Now, we think this is a valuable intervention, but again, the same problem, that it lasted as long as we were doing it. As long as the people were doing it, they seemed to get better. And it was better than the control group. And it's very important to have a control, no doubt about it. But nevertheless, this study just published in, I think, Annals of Behavioral Medicine. It's not listed in your thing, but I'll send you the reference if you'd like. And we're very happy with the results, but I'm displeased with the results. They're not good enough. If we're going to build interventions that work, we need them to last. Now, it could be a part of the problem, could be the fact that, well, they're online interventions, right? They're not group-based, okay? They're not therapeutic, really. But I think the problem is they don't focus on the right thing, okay? I mean, if social relations are fundamental, then we need a program on social relations, okay? And so my wife actually got me into this, I'll tell you. Social intelligence training, we thought, ought to be the focus. I mean, being mindful about your relationships, sure, that's important. I mean, being able to step back from your everyday automaticity and behave in an authentic way by knowing what you feel. No doubt, that's important. But, heck, you need to know about social relations and why they're important too. People need the training in that. So that's this one. This picture is one, it's sort of taken from Gargazaniga's work, but we're not really just one mind. Our minds are always connected with others, automatically. We just are. I mean, that's sort of the social self is really the self, okay, fundamentally. And so, how am I doing on time, by the way? 20? Ah, okay, so you got some more time with me, I'm afraid. So here it is. Social intelligence is the awareness that life is best understood and lived in relationship with others. The problem is, I think it's a social problem throughout our society, is that we're become relatively indifferent, okay, to our social selves, okay. At least we placed it lower in the hierarchy of need, okay, than it needs to be, and than it should be. This is our definition. Social intelligence means being able to, I have the word navigation in here, see? Successfully navigating the world around you. I was going to tell a story about me getting lost in Rocky Point, Mexico, and to talk about navigation and how my wife pulled me out and said, why do you keep, this is a Mexican village that my wife and I visit all the time, once a month almost now. And it has some challenging geographic features, you know. My wife is really good at geography. I used to think I was masculine, big part of the brain where can navigate geographic regions, but she is better than me. She says, Alex, why do you keep asking me where to go? We're going down the street. Do I turn left or right here? I'd say. And finally, this is talking about social support. This is the kind of social support that comes from conflict, you know. She said, look, figure it out yourself next time. I'm not going to tell you anymore. So indeed, I learned to navigate by using a part of my brain I didn't think was there anymore, I guess. But successfully navigating the world around you socially is part of what social intelligence is. And this is the primary definition you'll find in the literature. It's fundamentally built on social competence, or learning the social skills, empathy, perspective taking, learning to listen, not talk, not just talk anyway. All those things that you're supposed to have learned at home, you know, with mom, mostly, okay, or in school, but you didn't, and now don't know at all. But this social I talk to my students in clinical psychology. I say, right now you are very empathetic people. Okay? But the problem is, if you get into academia like I did, 30 years in, okay, you've totally forgotten about how to be empathetic, because it's all about performance and research and quantitative methods. Okay? Thing is, my approach is now to say, hey, look, we need to return to our roots and say, yeah, these qualities of the person in relation to others are fundamentally valuable and purposeful, okay, and useful in navigating life, in meeting our goals. Most of our goals are social anyway, okay. Most of our burdens are certainly social too. We've taken it a step beyond the social competence, though, idea, because social competence and social skills, as you know, can be used for good or ill. And there are many examples of people over-manipulating the world around them for their own purposes. Short-sighted, one would say, but certainly in the process, they certainly could say they're socially intelligent. I would say not, okay? And our view is because they're not taking the long view. In the long view, it's the strong social bonds, not the getting away with it, that makes a difference, okay? And that's what's health. That's what gives health and strengthening to the physiological systems that undergird our adaptations, is a strong social bond. So it's a shift. The second part, shift in the sense of self in relationship to others. So this is the humanization of social relations fundamentally, is it's not me but we. So it's again getting back to the idea that we belong together, you know, and not apart. That social intelligence training would be most valuable to teach. The skills are important, but they I pick them as secondary. Getting the right attitude and motivational state to say this is important, the skills will come naturally. The brain will learn. Once it has when it has the goal in mind, it will find a way to read another person's facial expression, okay? It will find a way. Except for those people who suffer from Asperger's or on the autism spectrum. Fundamentally, most people are quite capable of reading other people's emotion. They have to remember to look. They have to attend. Okay. So, here's consequences of a lack of SI. This, many of you know already about: disconnection, disregard, disengagement. I could have presented a number of studies about loneliness, about the increasing lack of empathy in youth, or the increasing burden that comes from being bullied in high school or middle school, and how those effects continue throughout a person's adult life. But I want to just get to a more broader concept of what we're talking about here. We've really come up with some principles that then guide the development of the interventions. And we have a prototype that we've built. I'd be happy to show it to you if any of you are interested. By going on our website, I can give you the password so you can actually see it. But it's fundamentally built on some principles. And the first principle is the one I've already mentioned, is humanization. And these others, I'm going to talk about in a minute as we go through them. So, humanization, we're not a collection of body parts. The people we look at are not a collection of body parts either, okay? And so it's important not to see people as a chess piece to be moved, okay? That's the manipulation standard, but that people are real. They're right here, they're right in front of us. And think about this in the development of caregiving strategies and training for professionals. Nurses, for example, who have often forgotten their roots in nursing, in their caregiving in life care facilities, is to see the other person for who they are, really, right there, not just the medications that they might need. Right? Our brains are built to experience what other people around us experience. So some of you are aware of the studies of how pain is, both physical pain and social pain are felt by the person watching the other person. Like you put two people in an fMRI, and one person is given a painful stimulus and the other person is simply observing it on the screen. You can see the same portion of the brain almost light up. And the person is observing rather than the person seeing. Interestingly enough, this is also true of social pain. If you see, you can feel another person's loneliness. It's the feeling you have within you. It's happening in your cortex, of course, as you mimic and understand that, you know, you are connected to the emotions of the people around you, if you allow yourself to be. The study of Alzheimer's patients and their empathy shows that they actually have more emotional contagion. They're more connected to the feeling around them, okay, which is a problem that needs to be solved, okay, to some extent, by the way the caregiving is structured to help these people in their social relations. It's not true, however, that we're wired to connect to people who are different than we are. And we are a classifying, grouping, in-group, out-group species. We do this, okay? And we do it some to our benefit, but we also do it that harms us and our social relationships. By grouping people in categories, black and white, Hispanic, Anglo, old, young, all these classifications often lead to stereotypes. If a person is in your out-group, you don't feel what they feel. If you see them in pain, you might have Schadenfreude, but you don't have a positive empathic response, okay? So part of our training is based on the principle that each person is unique, okay? And in order to understand them, we have to understand not as a group, okay, but as an individual. So see others as they see the world is the mantra that informs a set of sessions in our social intelligence prototype. Now, I just mentioned in-group and out-group, and that's really important. But it's also important to recognize that our brain does this automatically. And a lot of our functions, cognitive functions, are automatic. They're not based on awareness, okay? 95% or more of our neural processing is done without our awareness. So using work from Kahneman and others, it's important to recognize that we're built to categorize, we're built to segregate, we're built to expect, and then to reconfirm our expectations about the world around us. Those expectations that could be built from our early childhood experiences, our adult life experiences, our experiences in marriage and divorce, they color the way we see things, and in doing so, they're natural, adaptive processes, but they also lead us to be changing ourselves and the people around us if we're not careful. So understanding this means we should be more accepting that people often don't intend to mistreat us when they do, okay? And that we don't intend to mistreat or misjudge others when we do. But when we're aware of it, then it's time to do something about it. And about relationships, they're not automatic. The immediate gratification that comes from a good synergistic relationship connection, it might be, but certainly adapting an understanding, caring of the person as a whole, not just the halo effect of their wonderful person. It requires us to not only create a weak tie, but strengthen that tie, and doing things to maintain a relationship. And then finally, this is one we're building a new module on. It's just about choice, which gets back to the humanization principle that is applied to the individual who's getting a training, which is that we make choices every day, thousands of choices every day about whether or not to connect with another person, to relate to them as another human, or just to treat them as an object or someone to push aside. This is natural, okay? But we do make choices. And as humans, we're human as well as the other person. We make those choices, and the more we're aware of those choices, the more we're responsible for the choices and the outcomes that they bring. So choice is built in, sort of an existential principle, but it's built into the modules. In this case, we have 53, about average 5-minute sessions. Okay, 5 minutes because, well, attention span these days, 5 minutes is about it. But discussion can happen after that. But nevertheless, that's the way it's built to be modified, of course, because we get started with one prototype, 53 sessions, 7 modules. We'll build it out to have 8 modules, probably the same number of sessions. And it's made, we have different focus conditions, places where we like to put this one. Now, on this graph, you see soldiers. We're not sure we're going to do that. But juvenile detention center, we're planning, we have the go-ahead to build an intervention for, in their education programs for juvenile offenders. In middle school and high schools, we have a set of plans to build these for youth. And we've already piloted them in one school and beginning in others now. Now, the hand-holding, well, that may be not the best representation, but it's not bad. Caregiving is another. And there we have 2 projects in mind. One is to uplift the organizational climate, the feeling about the life care facilities in which residents find themselves in, by training the staff to be better, more socially intelligent with one another, and also in their interactions with residents. That is, to see them, to put meaning of the words of patient-centered care, okay, to give it real purpose sense than just lip service or hospitality, which is sometimes called. And then we're also planning a project on to encourage midlife, a sample of midlife people in our other sample, the resilience sample, who are potentially vulnerable because of childhood experiences, because of traumatic experiences, otherwise, or other evidence that they are vulnerable, that their midlife could be the trajectory toward difficulties physically and emotionally might be interrupted by better social intelligence training. Okay, so I think my time is up, and okay. So, and so just write us if you'd like to learn more. Be happy to talk to you. Thank you very much. Deborah, yes.
Thank you. This was a terrific talk, and I love the idea of SI. And it sounds like this model of intervention is targeted really to face-to-face relationships at a point in history when young people are doing more texting than talking, more Facebooking than face-to-face interaction. And so are there ideas or themes here that could be transported to virtual relationships, or did you view it really as specific to face-to-face?
That's a great question. The question has to be whether the concepts, ideas here are translatable into to deal with the problems with technology and virtual communications, and it's so popular among the youth and older adults. We're planning to, in fact, we almost got it worked out. We're going to have an app for a cell phone, okay, so that the program can be utilized while the kid is there waiting at the bus stop or whatever. And for older adults, certainly it's online now, so it could be used on laptops, that sort of thing. But You know, some people talk, Daniel Goleman in particular, on his book on social intelligence, talks about the potential harm that new technology has caused. And I think we talked about this earlier. We think it's a plus and a minus. I mean, there are lots of potential benefits to social communication that come from Facebook and texting and other methods by which people can have instant communication with others. The question is when and how. Those of you who teach classes, you know the problems of people getting on their cell phones or otherwise not showing continued interest in what's going on right in front of them. People in conversations with family members. You can see a collection of family members around the table, dinner table, and they all have cell phones. And they're not talking to each other. So obviously some regulation is needed. But who's going to do the regulating, you know? There has to be more awareness of the nature of the value of not using cell phones and what they are good for, I guess. We have it in our program, actually, the cell phone thing. Yes, sir?
Somewhat related, we gain a lot of communication, a lot of information in face-to-face communication. And, you know, this is not really my area, what you're talking about, this social interaction and so forth. But it seems like we may be, part of that loss you're talking about is we may be losing the ability of effective communication without the thing. If you don't have the device, your communication is not as good. I mean, making it even worse. There are things like, I used to do a fair amount of reviewing of grants, and you go in and have these meetings and discuss grants. I've been doing a little of that, and I've decided I don't really want to do it because I've been in sessions where it was clear we had 3 days in a row. We all read this bigger project, and all read it. We're supposed to block out our time. And first day, you know, we talked. The second day, it became very apparent that one of the individuals totally misunderstood what we were talking about on one factor, which I think in a face-to-face conversation, we would have picked up those non-verbal cues to go on. So if you've got any comments on that sort of thing, I would appreciate it.
The gentleman tells us about the nature of the experience as being not allowing all the channels of communication to come through. Body gestures, tone of voice, facial expression, all these things are missing from, online communications, you know. We were talking about this today. Actually, in my class, we were talking about this. A new way people, they use emoticons, you know, little faces to try to express their emotions. But that's really pretty remedial, you know. My guess is technology will catch up to that game someday, allow even more awareness of the whole person in their communication, and likely possible. But you're absolutely right. There are limitations to what the current online communications can give us. And face-to-face communication is more satisfying if it's a good connection, right?
Yeah, I was really wondering, though, you said you had actually said there were pluses and minuses to the technology, and I was wondering if there were some other minuses and pluses you might address. Now, obviously, one plus is the ability to easily communicate with people, relatives, friends that aren't there, you know, different city, different place, in the same city, wherever they are, and you need to talk to them, especially someone that you want to talk to, and you can't quite go visit them. You know, there are a lot of little advantages to this, but you might comment on that.
The gentleman asked me to comment more on the pluses and the minuses, but the pluses with regard to technology, in regard to building social relations. I'll give you a personal example, which might help, is that and this is something my wife tells me I'm not to do ever again, which is, she's right about this, which is to talk on my phone while I'm driving, okay? So I have a sister who lives in New York City, and she's very dear to me, and so I'm talking on my telephone, and I'm about to make a left-hand turn, and I do, this busy city street in Phoenix, and I swear, I was not at fault, but this car came crashing through and smashed right into me, right? But here I had my sister right there. She was right there, where I could say, look, I'm okay, I've just got it, and she could hear the cracking, the metal coming. The car was totaled, which actually was a good thing, I tell you, because my wife and I had gone to the auto dealership just a month before and bought this brand new Hyundai, but she thought I wanted this black sporty car with the red seats. And I thought, knowing her, that she wanted the black car with the sporty seats. So we bought the black car with the sporty seats. Neither of us wanted this car. Talk about communication. Face to face, right there with a salesman. So we now have a Hyundai Sonata. But nevertheless, there are times, even, it's not always like, the reason I bring this example up is it's usually to think about technology, social media is good for surface communication, which is many more people potentially in your network. But it's also true potentially valuable in other times, in times when you really need someone to be right there with you. And sometimes a voice, and you can feel emotion through voice. That carrying is right there. So there you have it, an example. I think we probably exhausted this time. Thank you.
It's been a great day, and I appreciate our speakers. Would you join me in thanking Debbie Carr, Karen Hooker, and Alex Zautra? Sometimes I think that we feel we're not very powerful, but when you hear presentations like we heard today, you realize the power of social influence. So whether it's planning what car you buy or planning a living will, it's amazing the influence we have on one another. Before we head to our reception, it is our custom that we make an award at each one of our symposia. And this year, the award is being given for research excellence. One of our co-winners is actually a faculty associate of the Center on Aging in the Life course, and the other is a recent graduate. The committee considered a number of nominations this year and decided that they wanted to select co-winners, but these co-winners are attached to one another in one way. It is my pleasure to confer the Research Excellence Award on Drs. Jill Suter and Megan Gilligan. Jill Suter came to us in 2004 from Louisiana State University, and in her research career she's received over $4 million in extramural research grants. She's the author of about 70 journal articles, referee journal articles, and about 30 or 40 chapters, and 30 of those referee journal articles have been published since she's been at Purdue. So she's been a very, very busy person and a very productive person. So when you think of many of these tricky relationships in intergenerational context of a family, things like a favorite child or ambivalence or how do families talk to nursing home staff, people think of Jill Suter. Megan Gilligan came to Purdue in 2006 and recently earned her PhD, the dual title in sociology and gerontology, and she's now an assistant professor at Iowa State University. She's the author of 9 referee journal articles. Yes, that is correct. She's the author of 9 referee journal articles, and she just left Purdue in August. Each of these women has a distinguished record of accomplishment given their rank. What's truly special, however, is their collaboration. Jill has mentored Megan extremely well, and Megan has seized those opportunities. Together, they have an extraordinary record of scholarly productivity. It seems to me like they have a column in 3 journals: the Gerontologist, Journal of Marriage and the Family, and Journal of Gerontology Social Sciences. Beyond that production, they're answering questions that make a difference in family life. And for that, we congratulate you. Thank you.
First, thank you so much. I really feel honored by this, and I especially feel honored sharing it with Megan. And as anyone who knows me well knows, I've said to probably each of you, I feel like in my collaboration with Megan, I have always been the lucky one in this, that I think that this is a relationship where I've benefited much more than Megan, and it's been hard to think of myself as a mentor because Megan has been a collaborator for at least the last 5 years, and as someone whose advice I seek first on academic issues. So I feel I've been very, very lucky.
Well, I'm really grateful to be here today, and I was glad to make the trip back from Iowa to come and share time with CALC friends and family. And I can't say enough about how grateful I am to have my collaboration with Jill. It's been a great 7 years. I'm looking forward to many more together.
Yes,
it's a very exciting and really interesting collaboration.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you so much.
And on that happy note, congratulations to both of you. We will close this part of our formal talks and invite you to join us for a reception and poster session. And the posters are being presented today by student researchers, so I encourage you to talk with them about their interests in aging research, but also a little bit of housekeeping. To remember to fill out the evaluation forms that you were provided. The symposium is very much a dynamic living experience, and we want to improve it and make it as valuable as we can to those who are coming to participate. And let me close by just thanking all of you for spending the afternoon. And again, let's thank our speakers for their resilience in a long night and long day of talks. Thank you much.